Sven-Get debate. We're looking at Vladimir Putin's re-election, the once and future president of Russia, the sequel, as you might call it. And it is, even though it's not a surprise, a seminal moment for Russia. With us to talk about it is a documentary filmmaker, Tanya Rachmanova, who is the author, just out a month ago, in French, unfortunately, for the time being, of At the Heart of Russian Power, Au cœur du pouvoir russe. Also with us, Anton Kozlov, who teaches at the American Graduate School here in Paris. Historian George Frederick Dewberry of Paris's Center for Russian, Caucasus, and Central European Studies, CERSEC is the acronym there. James Collins of the Carnegie Endowment for Peace is in Washington. He's the former U.S. ambassador to Russia from 1997 to 2001. And we're also joined on the telephone at this time by architect Alexandra Koptolova. She was in that demonstration inside of Pushkin Square, the one where we showed you images of the police coming in. Alexandra, tell us what's the situation where you are right now?
Right now it's all finished. And after the meeting, they tried to capture some of the guys who were protesting against the Putin. But right now it's all calm.
What was the mood like? We were discussing in part one how there's sort of parallel universes between, on the one hand, those who support Putin, those who are against him. Is there any way where there can be some kind of common meeting ground where the two can meet so Russia can be reformed?
I think it's already too late, and the government went too far. So I think no. Everybody is really afraid of some kind of revolution, but the government is not letting us any other choice, in a way.
They're not letting you any other choice, but they did allow the demonstration today. That's something that perhaps wouldn't have happened in the past.
Well, yes, actually, and they do pay a lot of people to come on the street to demonstrate for the Putin, but they do know that they tried to stop all the meetings, but there were too many people, and every time they try to stop us, the people go on the streets more and more and more. So the only thing is to stop the revolution is to let people go on the streets. I think so.
Alexandra Koptolova, what do you think would be a game changer? What is the measure that Vladimir Putin must do to restore credibility?
Well, at least he should start think about the people. He should start to think about what people are disappointed with, what they don't like, why is the reason of meetings. But he doesn't take that into account. He should stop the corruption in Russia, but I think it's really impossible because all the system is corrupted. And they're too afraid to lose the power and the control. So I'm not sure that Putin will be eager to go for the people. He's more afraid to lose the control.
All right, Alexandra Koptolova, thanks for that. Stay with us because we'll come back to you a little bit later on. Anton Kozlov, your reaction to what you heard for there?
Well, I don't think we're talking. I mean, I think the idea of revolution in Russia is a bit premature at this point. However, I think it is very true that the system built by Putin is completely inefficient, unworkable, and therefore has to be reformed. The problem is that in order to reform the system, Putin must radically change the rules of the game, which he cannot do because his problem is that Russian state and his administration, they're not very strong. He doesn't have the instruments of power and institutions upon which he can rely in order to transform the system. Therefore, it's a catch-22 situation when he needs to reform with certain instruments which he can get only when the system is reformed. So it's like a no-way-out situation, but I think I would hope that he is intelligent enough, and I'm sure he understands that he has to do something. The problem is that his outlook is formed by his past as an intelligence officer in KGB, and he considers that whatever opposition movement takes place in Russia is the work of the CIA, the State Department, and so on and so forth, which is, at this point, is ridiculous, and he should sort of look at the situation differently. People are very unhappy with the state that is incapable of providing basic services, health services, education services, housing, and so on and so forth. I mean, you name it, it's all there. Russia is certainly not a social state. It is not in any way a paternalistic state in the proper sense. It is a highly corrupt, very much a Latin American authoritarian regime.
All right, let's pick up on that point, because much of Putin's campaign rhetoric had a Cold War flavor with veiled and sometimes not so veiled accusations against the West. That us versus them tone still included in his victory speech Sunday.
We showed that no one can impose anything on us. No one. We showed that our people are perfectly able to distinguish a desire for unity and modernization from political provocation, which is only aimed at destroying Russia's statehood and stealing power. The Russian people have demonstrated that such scenarios will not come to pass in our homeland. Will they come to pass?
All right, no, they won't, says the crowd. George Frederick Dewberry, it does, the last couple of weeks of this campaign, it sounded a lot like the Cold War was back.
Well, I think what we have here is politics becoming culture, and that is the fact that we have a population which has been, for most of the 20th century, mobilized against the West after 1945 against the Americans. It's, as in the United States, Irish politicians till the 1920s ran against the British monarchy. You twist the lion's tail. This is something that's red meat. You can throw it out to the crowd. I think he's much more subtle than that. I think he knows he has to work with the West, with the United States. And you're going to see, I think, a dampening of this rhetoric as time goes on.
Well, dampening the rhetoric. So, for instance, on something like Syria, will we see a different tone from Russia at the Security Council?
I think we've already seen it with the condemnation of Syria, the Assad's continuous violence in Syria. That's the first open critique we've had. What we're having is nice guy coming up, the Khodorkovsky thing. No, this is rhetoric for the elections. Does he like the West? No. Does he need the West? He has to work at the West. He needs French ships. He needs technology. He needs modernization. He can't get that from his own country.
All right. Do you agree, James Collins? We're going to see good cop now?
Well, I don't know about good cop, but I agree with the thrust of what your colleague has said. I've read Mr. Putin's articles pretty carefully, and I've dealt with him before and how he works. And I think you have to be very careful about watching exactly what he says. I mean, in his article, for instance, on foreign policy, he was very tough on the United States and suggesting all kinds of things that we were supposed to be engaged in that were not acceptable. On the other hand, when it came to nuts and bolts, he did nothing to suggest that he isn't ready to work further on even a contentious topic like missile defense. We know that he is ready to move forward on WTO, and I think we have a genuine shared interest in seeing that succeed. So I think he's quite pragmatic on this. I agree that he's going to need decent relations with the West. He needs the economic connections. He needs the investment. He needs technology. And above all, he needs basically a situation in which he can work with the West and not be constantly under threat by it.
All right, and on the France 24 Debate Facebook page, a couple of predictions from you, the viewers. Valerie from Antwerp in Belgium says, I strongly think President Putin will face more and more protests in the future. He might survive the next 6 years, but after 2018, I will not bet my money that he will still win. While Lorenzo says, I suspect that City Hall in Moscow will eventually tire of the protests or be pressured by the government, i.e. Putin, to put an end to them. Then the fireworks will begin to happen. Do you see that for the time being they're going to tolerate protests, that they might dwindle for a while and then they'll suddenly crack down?
Well, from all he has done so far, and I don't think that somebody can dramatically change when he's 60 years old. Even at 30, it's difficult. So far, what he did, and this is something he learned in his KGB school, in the school Andropov, to do a spectacular. And I think that in the coming time, he will do something spectacular, either in favor of opposition or on the contrary. I think he will make one important step. I don't think that he will liberate Khodorkovsky because Prokhorov got such a good score. And this is Prokhorov, who was not as popular as Khodorkovsky. He understands that if he frees Khodorkovsky, he will become a very popular political leader, because Prokhorov showed it. But he will do something spectacular in one sense, but he won't reform anything. I agree with my colleagues. He can't do it because he is kind of si la branche. I mean, he has to destroy the whole system he built for himself and his friends to reform this. But one spectacular decision, probably, yes.
But Khodorkovsky may be freed by Medvedev before Medvedev leaves the office.
Impossible. Medvedev doesn't take any decisions. He just pronounces big speeches. Like, you know, Putin's article on economy, this 4RE, the innovation.
Right,
Medvedev said the same thing 4 years ago. So what? What has he done?
And we're getting word on from the Reuters news agency that blogger Alexei Navalny, who was one of those at the forefront of the demonstrations against Vladimir Putin ahead of the legislative elections, is in custody. That is according to the Reuters news agency. Now, to put Putin's campaign promises of major infrastructure overhauls and military spending, to put them into practice, analysts calculate Putin needs the price of a barrel of oil to stay above $130 a barrel. This Monday, West Texas crude, 107. And it's far from the highs of a few years ago. There you see the chart over the past 5 years. You get the sense, James Collins, that if anything, the Russian economy is more and more dependent on oil and gas.
Well, I think that's true, and I think Mr. Putin faces one particular challenge. When he came in the last time as president, he had low oil prices that then increased 100-fold, and he had huge pools of unused or underutilized assets that he could put back to work. And the combination, basically over much of his presidency, gave him growth rates that were the envy of the world. He doesn't have those capabilities this time. The oil price may go up, but it's not going to go up 100-fold again. And similarly, he doesn't have those underused or unused assets. So something has to change. He has to create conditions for real growth, real capacity to change the economy from one dependent on a few resource-based exports and exploitation into a diversified economy. Now, they've known this for at least more than a decade. The problem is, up to now, they haven't moved on it. And one of the real questions, I suspect the question for Mr. Putin, is will he find the formula to change that situation? There are those who say he will, and those, like many of your colleagues there, who say he's not someone who's going to change. I think we have to wait to see.
And also, it's a double-edged sword when the price of oil goes up, because it means that the utility bills will go up for Russians as well.
Right. That is certain. But I think the real problem with Putin, I mean, certainly the economic factor is very important. But I think the real problem in Russia, it's the question of property relations, law enforcement, and the
rule of law.
The rule of law, that's the foundation of any economic growth in that particular case. Because as long as the system remains as it is today, when there's no certainty about tomorrow in terms of property ownership, in terms of banking business, in terms of basically every aspect of economic activity, there will be no growth in Russia, because there will be money flight. People will continue bringing their money to Switzerland, to the Bahamas, and move to the south of France, and there will be nothing.
Let me ask Alexandra Koptelova in Moscow, how do you see faith in the rule of law improving? What can be done to, you were complaining earlier about the corruption in Russia. What's the most important thing to be done on that score?
The main idea is to change the system, because all the law is underneath the system. All the law and all the judgments, it's all corrupted also. So we have to change. First of all, we have to change the system. I do agree with what was said that Putin is like an artist who's playing the games and really afraid to lose everything. So first of all, we have to change the laws, make them more strict, because right now we have too many dots or spoils or openings in the laws so that everybody can pay money and go along with all the laws. I don't know how to explain that, but I mean, we don't have any rules to live. We have to change the laws. We have to change the system. Only after that we can think about the economics, the technologies, the development, and all the others. But first of all, change the system. Because it's not about the Putin. Putin is just a symbol. He's just a person. He's not the one who's our enemy. It's the system, and it's much more than just one person.
All right, and let me just ask George Frederick Dewberry a final point. For those of us who are not Russia specialists, it's also this issue of the population that's going down in Russia.
Yeah.
How do you stop that?
Well, it seems to be stabilizing a bit. Ukraine is where you really see the population falling through the cracks. You stabilize that by giving people the desire to create children to live in a society which has hope. You do that by having a medical system which gives better prenatal care. You give that by lowering the abortion rate, which in the Soviet Union and Russia has been huge. It's a question of hope. Why does France, of all countries, the most pessimistic country in an economist poll, have ZPG? Because the country invests in the future, invests in its children, but it's changing the system. I mean, you said last year the state is the problem. It's a weak state. You can have all the best wishes in the world from the strongest man, but if there's no channels to put that will through, it's just going to be wasted.
All right, and we're going to leave it there. Our coverage, though, of the events inside Russia will continue. We want to thank you for joining us. We want to thank George Frederick Dewberry for being with us, Tanya Rachmanova, also Anton Kozlov, and from Washington, James Collins, from Moscow, Alexandra Koptolov, and thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Stay with us. Coming up next, it's Business, and that's hosted by Marcus Carlson.